You know, the BJP is in panic mode when the central government announces the new unified pension scheme on the weekend. And hours later, within the same weekend, the Maharashtra government rushes to adopt it. As many of you might be aware, Maharashtra is heading for polls in October this year. So is Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, and later in the year, Jharkhand. The first state elections that will be a barometer of how popular the BJP remains after its underwhelming run at the general elections earlier this year. So the Maharashtra government's sense of urgency is not surprising. But why has the pension calculation of government employees become such a huge political issue? What is the problem with the existing pension systems? And why is the unified pension scheme such a big deal? Hello and welcome to The Bond Economist, your one-stop destination for professional advice on the economy. My name is Aurodeep Nandi, and today we talk about the economics and the politics behind government pensions in India. As always, if you like this kind of content, please hit like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support me, the super thanks button is below. First things first, what's wrong with the current pension systems? Well, at the core of India's pension problems is the question of who is going to fund it. Suppose if the government says that, don't worry, we are not taking any deductions from your salary. When you retire, say 30 or 40 years later, we will give you X amount of rupees per month. Guess who is paying for that pension then? Well, the next generation. So the government then would have to cut down on spending that would have been useful for that generation in order to pay the fixed pension promised to the older generation. It's an unfunded defined benefit where the benefit is defined. You get a fixed pension and the pension is adjusted to take into account inflation, and it is unfunded. Nothing goes out of your pocket now. The future generation has to deal with it. Now, this is the system that government employees had for a very long time, also known as the old pension system. However, by 2004, the government realized that this is not sustainable. And so the new pension system came up. And instead of defined benefit, here there's the defined contribution concept. The government said that, look, I am going to deduct 10% from your base salary. I am also going to add 10% from my side. And a professional pension fund manager will manage this money. By the way, the government's contribution was later revised up by the Modi government to 14%. You, the employee, will have the flexibility to choose how much risk and how much return you are comfortable with for the fund manager to undertake. And based on how much that pool accumulates at the end of your employment, you'll get your pension. Now, this was rolled out for central government employees, and eventually all states apart from, I think, West Bengal adopted this. So, where was the problem? The old pension scheme was great for employees, but terrible for the economy. The RBI estimates that if states stuck to the old scheme, the fiscal cost would have been 4.5 times higher than the new scheme. You can actually see here how much the pension outgo for states would increase dramatically under the old scheme compared to the new scheme. But the problem with the new scheme was the exact opposite. While it was great for fiscal and economic management, government employees were left with much lesser pension amounts. Naturally, after a while, people started complaining. No one, after all, reads an RBI working paper. The actual money they get in hand is what concerns people. And so, despite the RBI's repeated warnings, some states like Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Punjab, Karnataka switch back to the old scheme despite the higher fiscal burden. And look, the amount of money the government spends on pensions is no joke. You can see that while the central government has been steadily bringing down or at least stabilizing what it spends on pensions, for states the burden is much higher and it's quite elevated. But now with the state elections coming up and the BJP potentially on the back foot, some of these state governments are like survival first, sensibility later. Which is why before more states revert to the old system out of political compulsions, it was really urgent for the central government to announce a new revised pension framework. So how does this unified pension scheme, UPS, address these issues? Well, very simply, it's the hybrid of the old and the new pension schemes. As was the case with the old system, the UPS guarantees you a defined benefit at the end. You get a fixed pension amounting to 50% of the average basic pay in the last year of your service. And guess what? Your pension will be made inflation proof. So the major problem with the current pension scheme is taken care of. But it's also not going fully back to the old system. From the current system, the practice of the employee and the government jointly contributing to the pension fund still continues. And so you will continue paying 10% of your basic salary and dearness allowance. And to further sweeten the deal, the government will increase its contribution even further from 14% to 18.5%. But how much is this going to cost? Cabinet Secretary T.V. Somnathan, who essentially led the committee that came up with this new scheme, said that overall, in the first year of implementation, it will cost the central government around 7,000 crore rupees. That amounts to barely 0.02% of GDP. I mean, our fiscal deficit target for FY25, which is broadly the difference between the government spending and revenues, is 4.9% of GDP. So 0.02% of GDP is hardly anything. But that said, the cost will rise when the scheme expands from 23 lakh central government employees to 90 lakh state government employees. The real fiscal cost, though, will come many years later when employees of today become retirees of tomorrow. And when that happens, the cost will of course be greater than the current pension system. Because after all, as a government, you are guaranteeing a fixed pension adjusted for inflation. And also every year, you're paying a higher contribution. But it will definitely be lower than the old pension scheme. Because, well, there is still going to be a fund out of which the pensions will be distributed. So in many ways, this is a compromise between political sense and fiscal sensibility. But will it be enough to swing the needle for the BJP in the upcoming state elections? To find out, like, share and subscribe to The Bond Economist.